migrants and locals in cities, in Africa, and so forth. I know we have evidence on that, and those are some of the issues we should actually be looking at. The economic benefits of migration. And one of the initiatives which we are now undertaking is actually on the economics of migration. I don't want to call it a cost-benefit analysis because we can never quantify all the issues in terms of migration. But we are calling it the economics of migration, where we are trying to see whether it is beneficially economic for migrants and for which countries. Are they recipients, or are they destination countries, or origin countries, or even transit countries? So we are looking into all those issues on the economy of migration. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour cette.
Thank you very much for those comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I wanted to react to the comment that was made by the private sector, because since yesterday, we've been talking a lot about the infrastructure deficit. We've also talked about that we cannot be able to get the CFTA to give us the benefits we want unless there is also interconnectivity. We create regional connectivity, and it is clear that the railway investments that are currently taking place is actually one solution. I think we give the example of Ethiopia. I think we had the example from the Standard Gauge Railway in Kenya. I think we've heard of railways in Western Africa that are actually taking place. So I think it is good if the private sector makes the proposals like the ones they are making, because they are actually providing solutions, and unless we bring these solutions on the table where we have a sitting of the ministers of finance, it also becomes very difficult for us to see how we can optimize not only on the public-private partnerships, but also how we can also allow the private sector to be part of the solution of optimizing the benefits of the AFCFTA. So, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to align my response to the proposal that has been made by the private sector, that we consider this issue of the railways as we move forward. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you all of you who have made excellent presentations. Thank you to the member states who participated in the discussions and who made comments and enriched our presentations we've had. We would also like to thank our private sector partners. 1 minute.
The economics of migration, I think we really need to ensure that we strengthen data collection, capacity for data collection, both at the national level and also within ECA, as ECA assists member states to increase that capacity for statistics, data collection, and research. I think not just for migration, but I think across the board, even as we talk about manufacturing and so forth, AFCFTA and all of these things we've been talking about, that these capacities must be strengthened. We'd like to see that reflected in the report of this meeting. Thank you.
D'accord, d'accord. Merci, merci beaucoup pour cette.
Fully in agreement. Thank you very much. This is the cross-sectional question that has been coming up over and over again. I would like to thank all the participants and member states, all the partners who have taken the floor. We're now going to move to one last stage. And perhaps we need to discuss the date and venue of the next meeting. The Secretariat may have, or rather has already proposed that the 52nd session of the conference be held in March 2019 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. That is the proposal, March 2019 in Addis Ababa. You may have comments on that. This can be changed if there are proposals, if a member state offers to host the meeting and is prepared to meet the usual conditions. You are aware that it's a host country that normally would take up some of the costs for organizing the meeting. So these conditions are known. There's also a proposal of the committee of experts. The theme that was proposed, the new budgetary policy for Africa. We could perhaps give the floor to Adams to articulate this particular theme. They can perhaps give us some indication. Very briefly, we only have 5 minutes. And then we'll listen to the reactions of the delegates before taking a break. Adam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as Mr. Chair said, we would like to go back to have our this conference held in March for so many reasons. Of course, it helps all of us to discuss pertinent issues from African perspectives and then prepare African policymakers who participate in global meetings, especially World Bank, IMF meetings and other meetings. So I think March will be a very good time for us to have annual conference of ministers. In terms of the theme, what we propose as a secretariat for your consideration is the theme of new fiscal policy for Africa, not budget policy, new fiscal policy for Africa. And as you all know very well, fiscal policy and macroeconomic policy in general will be the main tool, has been and will continue to be the main tool for financing public investment and the achievement of the SDGs. As you all know, private sector role is still limited in Africa and it needs to be leveraged by the government. So in Africa today, government and fiscal policy in particular is very critical to financing our development and making any progress towards achieving the SDGs. So we are working on the theme and we are proposing the paper in front of you identifies the challenges, the key challenges with respect to fiscal policy. And table 1 shows that government expenditure and sources of development finance in Africa. As I said, tax revenue and fiscal policy is by far the main important tool for Africa today. So the discussion in COM 2019 will focus on the role of fiscal policy in financing sustainable development in Africa, and specific issues to focus on and challenges to deliberate on include: 1, how to integrate resource mobilization, budgeting, and development planning in Africa. These are the proposals. how to improve public financial management in terms of resource allocation and operationalization. 3, reforming the tax system, including tax structure, broadening the tax base, tax collection systems, and so on. 4, making the best use of public borrowing. And 5, how to tackle illicit financial flows in order to maximize revenue generation and revenue from natural resources in particular. So these are the key areas we would like to propose, and if approved by COM, ECA will also do evidence-based research, undertake evidence-based research on the area, and will have a report, a full report to launch in March 2019 and to inform deliberations during that meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oui, merci pour ces clarifications. Donc, on ouvre les débats pour les observations.
Take comments for the remarks from member states. DRC, you have the floor. Then Kenya. I'm taking the list first. Other countries, Guinea. Mauritania.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to make a submission. You talked about a budgetary policy, and he's right when he's talking about fiscal policy, but this does not mean that the thing that is being proposed is fiscal policy, is the budgetary policy, or fiscal policy in English, but budgétaire in French.
Que 3 intervenants.
We have 3 speakers, DRC, Kenya, and Guinea. DRC. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a reminder. You may remember that the 51st meeting should have taken place from the 12th to the 17th of April last. And this meeting was going to be merged with the expert specialized group on corruption and flight of capital, but the 2 meetings were split, and this is why it was postponed to now. You see, I was part of the meeting which was held last month, and the meeting in March. And that meeting is going to be held held next year in March, and I'm afraid that the 2 meetings may overlap, so we run the risk of overlapping. Now, perhaps the experts who are going to assist in the 2 meetings can be flexible, but our respective ministers, I don't think they will be willing to hold these 2 meetings for during the same period in the month of March. I don't have any comment to make on the theme of the meeting. I just wanted to point out those details. Thank you for giving me the floor, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to congratulate the Secretariat for the quality of the proposals that have been made in its note. I would also like to propose the following, and this is with regard to the themes, or rather the theme. It's the new fiscal policy for Africa, and this issue, as it was mentioned in almost all the documents presented at this meeting, is of paramount importance in the process of implementing the CFTA, because it is through the fiscal policy that public investments are going to be funded, that there will be creation of jobs, etc., etc. But what comes to mind is to know how, at the continental level, we are going to measure or follow up the efforts of the member states that are making in this process. I would have wished that among the proposals that have been put forward by the Secretariat, that they also include, especially in the light of experience have had that RECs have had, especially COMESA, who we're going to put up a multilateral budgetary or fiscal surveillance mechanism or context, which will help us to make a comparison between the various states concerns on the basis of a series of indicators, which also take into account macroeconomic and other details. And the same holds true also for SADC. And also, you know, the peer evaluation mechanism, which is done also in that context. So while we work towards creating this CFTA, we should be able to decide and understand the optimum status in which the countries should reach, so as to avoid what we would call the situation of having clandestine people crossing borders. And I think in the various sets, perhaps we could actually use these surveillance or control criteria that are used in other processes or mechanisms and apply them to our case when we want to implement the CFTA. Guinea, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would also like to thank all the speakers and all those who have taken the floor. The theme is a good one, but I wonder, see, today we are in the process of finalizing or trying to have all the countries of the African continent to accept this CFTA, and at the sub-regional level, we are talking about a single currency, like we have a single currency within ECOWAS. If the theme that we want to discuss in 2019 is going to be the new fiscal policy for Africa, it's good, because many changes are taking place within the sub-region or the sub-regions, or rather within the continent itself. But I would propose for this theme to, instead of saying new policy, because various changes take place or have taken place, wouldn't it be better to say which fiscal policy for the fiscal policy for the sustainable development of Africa, because these issues always spring up when we started this meeting. We're always talking about sustainability. We're always talking about Agenda 2063. So if we suggest themes, these themes have to reflect at least the essential questions pertaining to the continent's development. Thank you, Guinea, for the proposal. Senegal, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to the date of the meeting for March, I would just like to remind you that the ministers of finance are not very available in March, because many meetings are being held in March, and perhaps if this meeting is going to be held in March, we could have problems in having the attendance of the ministers of finance because they have a very heavy schedule in that month. The second proposal has already been tackled by many, i.e. the theme, a new fiscal policy. We can't, embark upon a new policy. We have these policies, so perhaps we have to say which fiscal policy could be applied in the context of CFTA, because it's when we are implementing the CFTA that the African countries have to mobilize internal or domestic resources to advance their development. So perhaps, it could be, because we have to face the challenges of the implementation of this CFTA, and we will have a problem with fiscal policies. We already have policies. It's not a new policy. We pursue, we share good practices. We might have innovative finance. The ECA has worked on all the financial aspects. They know exactly how taxation takes place, how remittances are made, and these things have been talked about for at least the past 2 years, and African experts have been reflecting on these items. I think it's just a continue. I don't think it should be a new policy as such. Thank you. Kenya, I do apologize. Perhaps I'm a left-hander, so this is why I always look towards the left. You have the floor, Kenya.
Remembering Kenya. But Chair, I seem to have a divergent view on the theme. We are all aware that AFCTA has just been implemented. It has just been adopted, and ratification is still going on. And this is a bouncing baby for Africa, which, if effectively implemented, will actually enable us to achieve the goals of Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 on sustainable development. And we have just started discussing the Continental Free Trade Area. And yesterday, or since we started the discussion around the theme, there were challenges that are faced by individual member states. And these challenges will impact negatively, definitely, on the implementation. My proposal is therefore to continue with the debate on the Continental Free Trade Area and actually address the key components of making Africa trade within itself. And those were eloquently stated as economic transformation, diversification, and value addition. The issue of fiscal and budgetary issues have also been discussed in this theme, and that's why we are talking of fiscal space. So if we abandon and not touch in the next theme, the Continental Free Trade Area issue, it's like we are starting on a new issue, jumping on another one, and I don't know whether in the next one, after the next years, we might jump on another issue. So I can interpret it locally or simply that we are starting a baby is starting to walk, then we are abandon this baby, we are moving to take care of another baby. So for this purpose, I was proposing that any theme that is proposed should revolve around the issues and the factors that affect the AFCTA. So that is my proposal. And I had a proposal here. If members are keen in looking at it, I would submit it to the Secretariat. So I'm not very keen to to support another debate or another theme that is not capturing explicitly the CFTA, because this will be the only way that will solve job issues, address the SDGs, and address the Agenda 2063 goals. Thank you, Chair. I submit.
Merci, le Kenya.
Thank you, Kenya. It all depends, what type of fiscal policies or budgetary matters we're going to discuss. Namibia, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, you said you're left-handed, but you keep looking away from us.
J'ai bien regardé, hein.
But I did actually look towards you, but I think you raised your hand just slightly, a bit too late.
Mr. Chair, I think just to propose a compromise theme, I think the presenter spoke about the role of the private sector and the importance of that in terms of fiscal policy. So I think we'd like to propose something just to bridge with the last intervention, that we still talk about the AFCFTA, but then we talk about the role of the private sector in the implementation of the AFCFTA as a way to bridge the two issues. So I repeat, the role of the private sector in the implementation of the AFCFTA as a way forward. Thank you, Chair.
Merci. On a eu...
Now, I'm speaking to the presenter. Let me point out the various proposals that have been made. As a reminder, in the month of March, there's a risk of overlapping of meetings. This is what DRC and Senegal have mentioned. And also, as far as the theme is concerned, the proposals, should we talk about policies or policy and avoid using the word new? And perhaps, the theme should be put in the form of a question. As far as the Kenyan proposal is concerned, I think we could also link the new fiscal policy, or the one that we're going to adopt, to the success of the FTA. So we can say implementation of the CFTA, which fiscal policy. Everything is linked, interlinked. There is also the private sector. And but Namibia, however, says that we should speak directly of the role of the private sector in the CFTA. So the floor is open still.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, honorable delegates. I think probably we can converge. First of all, we don't have to, of course, to stick to the word new. And then fiscal policy and revenue mobilization is about the SDGs, financing our SDGs. So the reformulation of the theme is quite possible, and actually one of the key reports we are talking about to inform deliberations in next year's Conference of Ministers is about fiscal policy and the financing of the SDGs. The honorable delegate from Kenya proposed that we continue to focus on AFCFTA. And I can promise you we cannot afford not to continue to focus on AFCFTA. So AFCFTA is a tool. Our discussion here is about how to use that tool to achieve the goals of SDGs and Africa 2063. So maybe we can bring it in the title of the theme, but it's implicitly there in our thinking that fiscal policy and revenue mobilization is a vehicle for African countries to achieve the objectives of the Continental Free Trade Area, which are an integral part of SDGs and Agenda 2063. So probably if you agree with us, maybe we can find a way to reword the theme. But the FCFTA will continue to be at the center of that theme. On private sector, all data and the table 1 on page 2 of document on dates, venue, and theme of the 52nd session of the Conference of African Ministers clearly shows that fiscal revenue, tax revenue, is the main source, one. Two, private sector finance need to be leveraged by government. But in the end, we all know that job creation will rely mainly on investment by the private sector. So for us, it's just the sequencing. We fully understand and we fully agree on the role of the private sector in achieving the goals of job creation, poverty reduction, and so on, and sustainable and transformative development. But in terms of sequencing, we think that we can focus first, and we need to focus first on the role of the public sector, and then maybe the year after, definitely, we can look, we can focus on the role of the private sector. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Adams, pour ce consensus que vous tentez de trouver. De toute façon, je ne suis pas sûr que le Kenya est toujours OK. Bon, on va vous remettre la parole, mais je pense que c'est le Rwanda. Hein? Voilà, on va donner au Rwanda. Après, on retourne au Kenya pour arrêter quelque chose. Rwanda.
Thank you, Chair, for giving Rwanda the floor. I just need some clarification regarding the theme. When you look at the document regarding the theme on Annex, you can see in 2009, the theme was on fiscal policy for domestic resource mobilization. For next year theme, what will be the difference if the theme has been already exhausted in 2009? Thank you.
Oui, Adam, vous avez un point?
Yeah. Can you come up again? I did not hear you very well.
Yes, sorry. My question was, the theme proposed is on fiscal policy for domestic resource mobilization. And the same theme was proposed at the 42nd session in 2009. So I was wondering what is the difference between the two? Because in 2009, the theme has been already discussed and some resolution has been proposed. So what will be the added value for next year? Thank you.
Where is he?
Thanks. I think the issue of fiscal policy is really an issue that has been discussed repeatedly. And as you all know, there are also a lot of reports out there. Actually, just 2 weeks ago, IMF had a forum on fiscal policy, and they have this forum annually. So the theme is very important and discussed repeatedly because issues are evolving. And we need to really look at the framework for mobilization of resources. And this framework and the issue and the underlying factors affecting resource mobilization and fiscal policy in Africa are also dynamic factors. I don't want to go into much details, but I think you all know, perhaps better than me, that the political context and the economic and social development policy context are the main factors that affect efforts by government to mobilize fiscal revenue, tax revenue in particular. And now we have new dynamics. We have Agenda 2063, SDGs, just a continuation of the MDGs, but through our discussion on Addis Ababa Action Agenda on Financing Development, we came to a clear conclusion that we need new strategies for domestic resource mobilization if we were to achieve the SDGs and avoid the pitfalls we faced in trying to achieve the MDGs. So we need, that's why we said new fiscal policy. We need new thinking, new perspectives on fiscal policy in Africa, on tax mobilization, mobilization of non-tax revenue, on how to tax multinationals, especially multinationals that work on extraction of natural resources. We have, over the last, since 2010, we have worked on illicit financial flows. And our estimates shows that we are losing about 2% of GDP in terms of tax revenue that we're not able to collect from multinationals, especially from natural resources. So there are a lot of new issues that we need to talk about in the context of fiscal policy and revenue mobilization. So probably I think we can add a lot of value to the discussion we had in 2009. Also, the global context has changed. In 2009, we were still talking about ODA and FDI as major sources of financing our investment. Now, and through our experience in the last 10 years, I think the focus on domestic resources has to be accelerated and has to be enhanced. So I think we will add value in that respect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
D'accord. OK, merci beaucoup. Maintenant, ce qu'on va faire, puisque c'est un point assez important et nous avons...
And we still have a few minutes left, all the more so because our rapporteur friends who were supposed to present the report today is telling us that they cannot do it within the deadline. So this report is going to be presented tomorrow. So after this discussion, we are going to adjourn the meeting up until tomorrow to come back and listen to the report and make comments to the report. Now, there is coffee available and tea. I would suggest that we go and have a cup of tea or coffee for about 10 minutes. So then come back and talk about and discuss the theme. We are going to take what was raised by Kenya and Namibia and also take into account what Rwanda has said and all the other submissions that have been made to come up with a wording. After the 10-minute tea and break, we'll adopt the theme for the next year, and then we are going to say cheerio, and we'll see each other tomorrow. So if you agree, coffee and tea is available, so we take a break now. Would you please applaud as a way of approving what I have just suggested? Thank you.
Distingué délégué, vous pouvez...
Delegates, could you please take your seats so that we resume our deliberations? Thank you. We have just had the break, and we have used the 15 to 20 minutes to discuss the theme. We have held consultations and on proposals made by Kenya, the Secretariat, and Namibia. Namibia wanted to lay emphasis on the private sector, and Kenya wanted us to remain within the framework of the free trade area, and the proposals which were given to you on the budgetary policy. The discussions enabled us to arrive at an understanding, and the Bureau is going to continue the drafting of the theme with the Secretariat from now to tomorrow, and we can deliver that. We can be able to give you the contents of that report. So those are the three proposals that came out. We can work on that basis now. Of course, what remains is the wording. We shouldn't take a lot of time. We shall continue with the Secretariat to work on the wording, and tomorrow morning we shall definitely deliver the theme to you. Concerning the date, I think it is the same proposal too. We cannot tell you the exact date. March 2019 could bring in some overlaps. The Secretariat should discuss with the African Union to and then come back and tell us the exact date. Thank you for the comments which you made and the attention that you laid on this. If there are no objections or questions, then I think, yes, I recognize Namibia.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just a clarification. You're saying the Bureau and the Secretariat are going to continue to discuss the theme. Is that it? So you'll do it maybe tonight or tomorrow? The Bureau and the Secretariat will consider the theme or the three proposals made? Just a clarification, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, those are the three proposals because the theme was debated, was discussed, proposals came up. You yourself you gave us the wording, and we have the wording. I think today it's an issue of formulation or wording. That's what we have now to do. So it's not a discussion, but it's a form of wording on the basis of the three proposals. Namibia, is that fine? I think the final version will be presented, but it's on the basis of the proposals which you made. South Africa.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm not objecting any of the proposals, but just if you can give us guidance and clarity in terms of which bureau are you talking about? Is it the outgoing bureau that is going to consider, or is it the incoming bureau? Because now, if it's the incoming bureau, then you're talking about you're talking about 3 or 2 member states, and that might be problematic because it's not going to be representatives in terms of all the regions. I wish I could provide a solution or direction in terms of how we should go about doing it, but having to reduce it, the matter to the Bureau, it diminishes the role of the plenary, and it takes away the right of member states to debate issues, which is very, again, not a good thing, considering what happened before the session started yesterday. We do not want to go there. Perhaps we should open up the matter here. If we do not have time, let us maybe try to come early tomorrow morning, and then maybe have some time, give the member state time to think about the best way to formulate or to come up with formulation, and perhaps we can take 30 minutes tomorrow morning and quickly go through it, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Merci pour la proposition. Je pense que aussi on est dans le même, on va dans le même sens. Je pense que rien n'est imposé. Il n'y a que des propositions.
We just have proposals. We had envisaged tomorrow as a date for reading the proposal, the final proposal, and of course to discuss around that proposal. So we need to understand that earlier on we opened this item, we read the theme, and we held an open discussion. We listened to the delegates, and it was only Kenya which came back to this, and definitely Namibia on the private issues. But maybe there could be others. There could be others who could have ideas if we reword this, and that's why we took break. We held a break to go to Kenya, Namibia, and try to look at their ideas again and try to merge them, because it is not always easy in 1 or 2 sentences to bring out all the ideas that they are proposing. So we wanted to take time and reward this, and then tomorrow morning we again hold a discussion. If someone else has an idea which is contrary, that would come out from what Kenya said or Namibia said or what the Secretariat proposed, then they could come up with that idea, and then we look at it together. Otherwise, after the formulation, we shall have a debate around that, and maybe it will take 30 minutes to say whether we agree or not. Let's remove this, let's add this, until we reach a final formulation or wording that is agreeable to everyone. So that's what we agreed, dear delegate from South Africa, which is not contrary to what you are saying, yes. Are there any other comments? Great. Ethiopia.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to give an idea on how we should proceed. Regarding the proposals presented by maybe Namibia and Kenya, although I agree with your proposal to discuss this issue tomorrow morning, it would help if we could see, if it can be presented on the screen, displayed on the screen. So either we build on it or we come up with a different idea, if that is acceptable by you, Chair. Thank you.
That's a good proposal. We are going to display it. That's all, so that we can have a better discussion on it. Ethiopia, can you hear me? Oh, great. You are requesting that we display that today or tomorrow? Your clarification, please. Today or tomorrow?
What I say is, for the discussion to take place tomorrow, but for the proposals to be displayed today. Thank you.
D'accord, okay.
All right.
Mais je peux le lire, non?
Maybe I can read it. Or maybe it will take time for typing DRC. Thank you.
Ethiopia, I can read?
If
Yeah, okay. Bon, on va lire. On donne...
DRC will take the floor, and then afterwards I will read it. I'm not contradicting my predecessor, Mr. Chairman, but I would like to add another proposal which take into account all the aspects that we alluded to earlier on. DRC would like to take into account the budgetary policy presented by the Secretariat and take into account the African Continental Free Trade Area, and not to forget Agenda 2030 and 2063. I would like to suggest a wording, a formulation for discussion, which budgetary policy for the African Continental Free Trade Area in the framework of the Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063.
Voilà, donc...
There is another proposal that is being added. I was already thinking about that. You can note. Now, I'm going to read this so that we move a little faster. Maybe the English speakers.
D'accord, donc...
Good. The proposal of Kenya towards the operationalization of the free trade area through economic transformation, diversification, and value addition towards the era of the digital economy. That's the wording which we received from Kenya. For Namibia, the proposal was reworded this way: the role of the private sector in the operationalization of the free trade area for the transformation, for the socio-economic transformation, diversification, and the value addition in Africa towards the digital era. And then the last one, which has just been given, is which budgetary policy, which for the trade area within the framework of Agendas 2063 and 2030. So I think it's well noted. I read slowly so that the interpretation can pass through. Kenya has a comment.
Sorry, Chair, to come back. The English English translation that I've had is operationalization. But the word I used, that Kenya used, was advancing. So I don't know what they mean. Yes, advancing the CFTA. Sorry. So the word is advancing, not, yeah, thank you.
D'accord, merci, c'est plus clair. Donc, le Kenya, faire avancer.
So Kenya, in promoting the free trade area through the economic transformation, diversification, and the value addition towards the digital economy. And the word is advancing, not operationalization. Namibia, the role of the private sector in the operationalization of the free trade area for the socio-economic transformation, diversification, and value addition in Africa towards the digital economy. And the last proposal, which budgetary policy for the free trade area within the framework of agendas 2030 and 2063. I think those are the three proposals which we received, the additional proposals which we received, and it's on those three that we would like to work with the Bureau and the Secretariat so that we can come up with a final, proposal. We shall discuss tomorrow morning for 30 minutes to work on them and arrive at an understanding. If you agree, you can continue thinking about this together. It's free and it's open. We're not imposing anything. These are proposals, but we would wish that in the first 30 minutes tomorrow morning, this issue is finally dealt with once and for all. If you still have time, we can stay and discuss it now. That's another solution. So she says that when you sleep over something, you get new ideas. Since it has been well noted, our friends from the left, have you noted this well? To the right of the room. Is that okay? The right is always aligned with us. In the center, they are always this way or that way, not to the right and not to the left. Grace, Niger. Mr. Chairman, please, could you please read through the first proposal of Kenya, please? Let me read through the three proposals. It's promoting the continental free trade area. So advancing the African continental free trade area through economic transformation, diversification, and the added value or value addition towards the digital economy era. And Namibia is as follows. The role of the private sector in the in advancing the free trade area for the socio-economic transformation, diversification, and the value addition in Africa towards the digital economy. And then finally, DRC, what budgetary policy for the free trade area within the framework of the implementation of agendas 2030 and 2063. I hope it is clear. Those are the three proposals. Senegal. Senegal, we have been requesting you for the floor. I think that, could you have other proposals? because there's an implementation of the CFTA, and we need to think about that. Let's take into account those observations and come up with a proposal, because if I propose and then other people come up with proposals tomorrow, shall we really finish? Because the theme shouldn't be so long. So personally, I was thinking about funding development in Africa, because we have all our agendas, and Africa can only fund its agenda that's ongoing and that which is put in place. Of course, the fiscal policy should support the PPP. We're in this era, this region. We don't have to put everything in the theme that we are proposing. Yes, but I think you are agreeing with us that we choose one theme. And what we want to discuss is that when we get one theme, all the contributions are going to be brought together for the need of drafting a concept note. Of course, a simple sentence cannot tell everything. The rest is going to be explained after you have given us many ideas. And those ideas can't be rejected. When we write the concept note, those ideas will be brought in. We have three proposals which are not far from each other. The first one is how to advance. The second one is talking about the private sector, increasing the private sector to move forward. So you can see that the two themes are agreeing with each other. Then the budgetary policy, what budgetary policy can we come up with in the CFTA? How can we consider that budgetary policy? Is it going to motivate and incite the private sector to come in and work with us in the CFTA in advancing the free trade area? So all this within the framework of considering how we can come up with one thing. Even if we can also talk about the private sector in the concept note. The budgetary policy can always come back, and in my opinion, I need to sleep over this, of course, so that tomorrow I have a clearer head. We can take 30 minutes tomorrow and agree on the theme. If there are any other sub-themes that we can select or choose, we can bring them forth tomorrow and then discuss them and put everything in the concept note. I think we can decide on that now, because it seems that the delegates are tired, and fortunately we had a good lunch. So if there are no objections, then my friends from the left, on the left, or in the center of the room, or to the right. The people on the right are always with us, he says.
All right, so the only thing left is to thank you for your contributions, thank all the presenters of today, thank all the delegates. From here, I'm seeing quite a number of people who are sleeping, but they are fewer than yesterday. So that's a very good performance. We would like to meet back here tomorrow at 9:30, and 30 minutes shall be allocated to discussions on the theme. You have taken note of the three suggestions, and 30 minutes should be sufficient to come to a final decision. So this session is adjourned until tomorrow. Good evening. Let's clap for the presenters.